Ladies and gentlemen, I got another video from Critical Drinker. Why modern movies suck. Let's react to this, yo.
Now, you don't need me to tell you that modern Hollywood has got itself some problems. Whether it's ongoing strike action, declining artistic creativity, an over-reliance on remakes and tired genres that are past their peak, or a general aversion to doing anything particularly new or inventive. And to be fair, I've covered a lot of these problems in previous installments of this series, but one of the biggest overriding factors in all of this is a financial one. Put simply, movies are too damn expensive these days. The production budgets for mainstream Hollywood films have been steadily rising since the 1990s, but the process has accelerated out of control over the past few years. In fact, out of the 100 most expensive movies ever released, 66 of them were made in the past 10 years. But Drinker, you intoxicated bastion of common sense in a world gone mad, I hear you say, why is this a bad thing? If studios want to spend more money on their films, why not let them get on with it? Well, the thing is, this kind of approach to filmmaking creates problems. The kind of problems that cause a ripple effect through the entire industry, ultimately undermining the quality of the films that we get to watch. The first and most obvious of these problems is an economic one. As I explained during my Indiana Jones video, once you factor in promotional costs and distributors' fees, the average movie needs to make about 3 times its production budget just to break even. That's hard enough even for relatively small movies, but it becomes infinitely more difficult for films at the top end of the scale. Because if your movie happens to be one of the growing number that cost more than $300 million to make, then you're looking at close to $1 billion just to start turning a profit. Even now, there's not many films capable of reaching that milestone. Which brings me along to another problem, the cost of failure. See, the financial losses incurred by the studio begin to rise exponentially as the budget goes up. A $50 million flop is embarrassing to be sure, but a $300 million flop is absolutely disastrous. And the inevitable result of massive amounts of money being at stake is that studios tend to seek out safety, predictability, and proven track records. Rather than taking a risk on smaller, riskier, and more diverse projects, they tend to blow their load on whatever's popular right now. And up until recently, that meant either big budget effects heavy superhero flicks, big budget effects heavy resurrections of old franchises, or big budget effects heavy remakes of classic films from previous decades. Spot the common factor here? There seems to be a real mentality in Hollywood now that bigger and louder somehow equals better, and the result is an endless competition to produce the most visually stunning pieces of cinema possible. But the problem is that the more you focus on the visuals of your film, the more you tend to neglect everything else around it. These days there's an over-reliance on spectacle and scale to draw audiences in, and it ends up becoming a crutch for bad writing and lack of creativity. I mean, you can't honestly tell me that you were gripped by Avatar 2's compelling and complex storyline. Jesus, if you can even remember a single thing that actually happened in that movie, I'll be impressed. What you end up with instead are a series of beautiful but ultimately empty and meaningless tech demos that keep you momentarily distracted but offer no long-term impact or emotional payoff. They stimulate your eyes but not your brain, and the more it happens, the more audiences start to become jaded and disinterested in what Hollywood has to offer. Another big problem with so much money at stake is studio interference. I've lost track of the number of films that have been derailed and ruined because the studio started to get jittery about the filmmaker's creative vision and decided to stick their oar in with endless test screenings, last-minute rewrites, and mandatory reshoots to produce something more commercially viable. Again, it's a nice idea in theory, but the problem is that studio executives aren't storytellers, they're money men, and the decisions they make tend to be driven by whatever they think will generate the most money. Narrative cohesion and creative integrity don't tend to factor into their thinking, because all that really matters is keeping the shareholders happy. Not only do rewrites and reshoots undermine a filmmaker's creative vision, but they also push the film's production budget even higher, making it even more difficult to turn up profits. So what do you do when movies cost a shit ton of money to make and your confidence in new projects is at an all-time low? Well, you resurrect dusty old franchises with inbuilt fan bases and strong name recognition and hope that it'll somehow translate into financial success. Why do you think we've seen so many new Star Trek, Star Wars, Terminator, Indiana Jones, and Ghostbusters movies
Yep.
in recent years, not to mention Disney's endless cannibalization of their
Remakes.
classic animated films.
You ain't
It's
wrong.
because all of those things have been big hits at some point in the past, and so logically, if you can shit out a lazy cash grab remake or unnecessary sequel, then it'll be equally successful, right?
Wrong.
The top 10 movies so far this year, 7 of them are either sequels or remakes of older films. And the thing
You know, I'm surprised Barbie made $1 billion. Now again, we can talk about this in another video, but like the media now would think that this is the norm, but it's not. Barbie's just very popular, so it's a very different scenario.
And the thing is, it didn't always used to be this way. Go back in time 20 years, and the biggest films of 2003 were Return of the King, Pirates of the Caribbean, Finding Nemo, and Bruce Almighty. Jump back 30 years, and Jurassic Park, The Fugitive, The Firm, Sleepless in Seattle, and Mrs. Doubtfire ruled the box office. I mean, I know which movies I find more worthy of my time. There's also a rather predictable tendency to follow the crowd at the top levels of Hollywood, leeching off winning formulas to replicate the successes of others rather than taking the risk of inventing your own. I know it's become popular to shit on the MCU nowadays, but in its prime, it absolutely changed the landscape of modern blockbuster movies to the point where almost everyone adopted the exact same style and tone. Serious, mature, and thought-provoking storytelling was out, and snarky, ironic, self-deprecating humour was in. How many movies over the past 10 years can you think of where characters stop every couple of minutes to make another lame attempt at a Joss Whedon joke? It's because everyone wanted their movie to be the next Avengers.
Yep.
The result of all these different factors is a kind of creative inertia, a feeling of bland, depressing sameness. You get the sense that most big budget movies nowadays all rolled off the same assembly line, composed of the same basic ingredients with only minor alterations. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that we seem to have reached the maximum upward limit of how big and expensive movies can possibly be, beyond which it becomes impossible to even turn a profit. And maybe it might be time for studios to start backing down a little, stop risking everything on one mega project that has to appeal to as many people as possible, and start investing their money in a more diverse range of smaller, cheaper, creatively ambitious
I
films
agree.
with a lower bar for success. Projects where the filmmakers actually get the creative freedom they need to bring their visions to life without constant interference, where they can afford to take risks and try out new ideas without the fear that one single failure could bring down the entire studio. And to be honest, I think we could all benefit from a bit more variety in our summer movie season. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
Yo, I actually believe that most films shouldn't be costing more than 100 mil. Like, you know what I mean? Like, now again, it depends on if they're building a franchise or a universe. You know, it all depends. But like, if it's just a one solo film, I think 80 million, 50 million is enough. You know, you don't need to go crazy. The CG might be expensive, but you got to mix in, you know, practical and CG to reduce that, you know, expense. I'm just saying, like, for me personally, I don't think movies should be going above 100 million in terms of production costs. It's ridiculous, you know. And again, I don't blame the movie industry. It's just too expensive. You know, it is. The economy is bad, bro. If you guys don't know, there's a huge inflation. So, hey, it is what it is. Now, one thing I like about Critical Drinker, what he said was there is no new ideas, you know, of new storytelling from Hollywood. It's just a bunch of remakes, bunch of you know, just nonsense and woke shit that we're just getting these days. You know, Snow White now they're making Snow White. Like, bro, give us something new, man. Don't give us something that we've seen in the past. We're tired of that, bro. Give us something new. Make something new. You don't have to make the production cost to be 200 million. Making 50 million is gonna be profitable either way. You know, and then when it goes big, you know, and you do a lot of like series, then obviously you can budget for 200 million and make it better. You know what I mean? So it's like you don't need all that high costs. I just think Hollywood is lacking creativity right now, you know. And again, studios they do interfere, you know, like he said, this is this is a huge problem because at the end of the day, they want to impress their executives and their shareholders. You know how it is. It's a business, it's very complicated. But you know, the way it is that they're preventing like directors from making their own film the way they want, the way they envision it, which is not a good thing. Like, look at what happened with the Justice League thing. Zack Snyder's whatever vision was just scrapped. I, hey, it is what it is, man. If you guys enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up. I'll see you next time. Take it easy.